You might want to shut that excavator off before your HOA makes the most expensive mistake in this county. The words came out quieter than I expected, almost lost beneath the diesel engine growling 20 feet from my grandfather's cabin. It was 7:13 on a cold October morning, and the smell of pine needles, damp soil, and exhaust hung between the trees. I had driven 3 hours expecting silence. Instead, I found an excavator parked beside my porch, 2 contractor trucks blocking the gravel drive, and Vanessa Whitmore standing beside her white Range Rover with a leather folder tucked beneath one arm. She looked completely at home on property she had never owned. "Mr. Cole," she said, raising a sheet of paper between 2 manicured fingers, "you were given sufficient notice." I killed my truck and stepped onto the gravel. Crunch, crunch. Every footstep sounded unusually sharp in the mountain air. Notice for what? She gave me that polished smile I had learned to distrust. Removal of an unauthorized structure within Silver Pines Estates. She actually pointed at my cabin. The same cedar cabin my grandfather Walter had maintained for more than 40 years. The contractor near the excavator glanced at me, then at Vanessa. He clearly wanted no part of whatever this was becoming. I walked toward the porch without answering her. That was when my boot stopped beside something half buried in the dirt. A rusty steel survey pin. Maybe 3 inches remained visible above the ground. I remembered seeing it as a kid. Grandpa Walter had once tapped it with his boot and told me never to move it. Vanessa mistook my silence for surrender. "Once the structure is removed, we can discuss bringing this parcel into compliance." I looked from that steel pin to the decorative Silver Pines entrance sign visible through the trees nearly a quarter-mile downhill. Something about her words bothered me. Not the threat. The geography. I pulled out my phone and called Daniel Mercer, the surveyor who had been helping me untangle my grandfather's old property records. He answered on the 4th ring. "Dan, I need you to read parcel 18 to 447 back to me." Paper shuffled on his end. A keyboard. Clicked. Then nothing. 5 seconds passed. 10. Even Vanessa stopped talking. "Ethan," Daniel finally said, his voice suddenly careful, "where exactly are you standing?" I looked at Vanessa, then at the excavator, then downhill toward the neat stone monument announcing Silver Pines Estates. "At my cabin." Another pause. "And where is Whitmore?" "Standing right beside me." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Don't let anybody move anything." Vanessa folded her arms. "Who was that?" I slipped the phone into my jacket and looked again at the old survey pin beside her expensive boots. "Someone who knows where your property line actually is." 3 months earlier, that cabin had been the last place on earth I expected to find trouble. I had inherited it after my grandfather Walter died, along with 48 acres of pine, granite, and sloping mountain ground that had been in our family since the late 1970s. Nobody would have called the place luxurious. The cedar siding had faded almost gray. The porch leaned just enough to make a marble roll toward the steps. The roof needed work, and the old iron gate at the bottom of the gravel road complained every time I opened it. But when I stepped inside that first afternoon, the smell stopped me cold. Cedar, dust, old coffee, a trace of wood smoke trapped in the stone fireplace. It smelled exactly like my childhood. Walter had brought me there every summer when I was a kid. He taught me how to replace deck boards, sharpen a hand plane, and listen to a building before deciding what needed fixing. I eventually turned those lessons into a career. I spent 16 years as a construction superintendent before starting my own finish carpentry business. I understood measurements. I understood plans. Most importantly, I understood that old structures usually told the truth if you paid attention. My plan was simple. Replace the roof before winter, level the porch, restore the windows, and keep the cabin looking almost exactly the way Walter left it. On my second weekend, I found his old brass key hanging from a nail inside the kitchen cabinet. It opened the iron gate. Beneath it sat a folded hand-drawn parcel map, yellowed at the edges, with Walter's handwriting running along one side. I glanced at it, smiled, and put it back. At the time, it seemed like nothing more than another piece of family history. The rusty survey pin near the porch meant even less. I remembered Walter pointing it out when I was 12. "That stays where it is, Ethan," he had said. "Lines matter." Back then, I thought he was giving me another one of his practical old man lessons. I had no idea how literal he was being. The only thing that had changed dramatically since my childhood was the valley below. Silver Pines Estates had appeared beyond the ridge, Rows of large homes with matching roofs, landscaped entrances, and streets so clean they looked freshly washed. From my porch, the development seemed almost miniature, separated from me by hundreds of yards of timber. I had no reason to care about it. I was not using their roads. I was not using their amenities. As far as I knew, we had absolutely nothing to do with each other. Then, late one Saturday morning, tires whispered across my gravel road. I looked up from replacing a porch board and saw a white Range Rover coming through Walter's iron gate. It stopped beside my truck. The driver stepped out holding a leather folder. That was the first time I met Vanessa Whitmore. Vanessa Whitmore stepped out of that Range Rover like she had arrived for an inspection I had somehow forgotten to schedule. White slacks, tan loafers, sunglasses pushed into perfectly arranged blonde hair, and a leather folder pressed against her side. I shut off my circular saw, and the sudden silence made the mountain feel twice as quiet. "Ethan Cole?" she asked. I nodded. "Vanessa Whitmore, president of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association." She extended her hand, then glanced at the sawdust covering mine and reconsidered. That told me almost everything I needed to know. "What can I do for you?" I asked. She opened the folder. "We have received concerns about renovation activity on this property." I looked toward the valley. Silver Pines was hundreds of yards away through thick timber. "Concerns from who?" Her smile tightened. "Residents. Construction noise carries." I checked my watch. 11:20 in the morning on a Saturday. "I am replacing 3 porch boards." Vanessa ignored that. She began reading from a printed sheet. Exterior modifications required architectural approval. Firewood could not remain visible from common areas. Commercial vehicles required authorization. She even mentioned the dark green stain I had bought for the shutters. I let her finish. "I am not part of your homeowners association." The mountain breeze stirred the papers in her hand. For the first time, her expression changed. "Not much. Just enough. This property falls within the Silver Pines community expansion boundary." "According to what?" She pulled out a glossy map with colored lines and pointed to a shaded area covering the ridge. It looked official. It also looked new. I had spent enough years reading construction plans to know that a polished drawing and a legal survey were not the same thing. "My deed does not mention Silver Pines. Older deeds often predate community development." She said it like she was explaining gravity to a child. Then she turned toward my pickup. "That vehicle may also become an issue." I actually looked behind me, wondering if another truck had appeared. My Ford. Visible work vehicles affect community standards. The truck was 12 years old, clean, paid for, and sitting on my gravel driveway. I felt sawdust sticking to the sweat on my forearms. "Vanessa, this is private property." She closed the folder with a soft snap. "Everything beyond that ridge belongs to Silver Pines." There it was. Not a request. Not even an argument. A declaration. I followed her finger toward the trees, then down toward the neat rooftops in the valley. Near her front tire, sunlight caught the rusty head of Walter's old survey pin. I almost mentioned it. Instead, I remembered his voice. "Lines matter. Send me whatever you think I am required to follow," I said. Vanessa smiled again. "I will." She climbed back into the Range Rover and drove away through my grandfather's iron gate. 4 days later, the first violation notice arrived. The first envelope was waiting in my mailbox Wednesday afternoon, thick cream paper with the Silver Pines logo, stamped across the top like a government seal. I opened it on the porch while the smell of fresh-cut cedar drifted from the boards I had installed that weekend. $250. Unauthorized exterior renovation. I read it twice, folded it back along the original crease, and set it beside my coffee. The second notice arrived 6 days later. $750 for continued noncompliance, improper storage of construction materials, and an unapproved commercial vehicle. Apparently, 3 cedar boards stacked beneath my porch and my Ford pickup had become threats to civilization. I emailed Vanessa copies of my deed and asked her to identify the recorded covenant giving Silver Pines authority over parcel 18 to 447. Her reply came 11 minutes later. "Community boundaries have been established through current development records." No deed, no covenant, no recording number, just another attachment showing the same glossy colored map. Then the signs started appearing. I drove up one Friday evening and found a polished green plaque mounted beside Walter's iron gate. Silver Pines Private Road. Authorized residents only. I sat behind the wheel listening to my engine tick as it cooled. That road had been gravel when I was 8 years old. Walter had paid to grade it. I had receipts for maintenance going back more than 20 years. I removed the sign carefully, placed it inside my workshop, and photographed everything. Saturday morning, 2 new signs appeared. That was when I stopped assuming Vanessa was merely confused. A week later, a security guard in a golf cart blocked the road while I was carrying roofing supplies uphill. Resident identification, he said, holding up one hand. Pine dust floated through the sunlight between us. I own the cabin at the top. He checked a clipboard. That structure is listed as non-compliant. I showed him my driver's license and deed. He looked embarrassed, but his radio crackled before he could answer. Vanessa's voice came through clearly enough for both of us to hear. Do not grant access without association authorization. I stared at the little speaker. Then I photographed the golf cart, the sign, and the position where he had blocked the road. I turned around rather than make the situation worse. By then, I had started a folder of my own. Every letter, every email, every photograph, every date. Vanessa kept sending paper, and I kept saving it. The final envelope arrived by certified mail on a Monday morning. This one felt different. No fine, no warning period. It called my grandfather's cabin an unauthorized structure and stated that Silver Pines intended to pursue removal if I failed to bring the property into compliance. At the bottom was Vanessa Whitmore's signature in blue ink. I ran my thumb over the indentation her pen had left in the paper. She had finally stopped arguing about porch boards and pickup trucks. She was claiming the ground beneath my feet. That afternoon, I put Walter's brass key, the old parcel map, and every notice into my truck. It was time to find out where her confidence was coming from. The county records office smelled like old paper, floor wax, and burnt coffee. I arrived 10 minutes after opening with Walter's map under my arm and Vanessa's removal notice inside a manila folder. A clerk named Susan pulled parcel 18 to 447 onto her computer while I stood across the counter watching blue property lines appear over an aerial photograph of the mountain. For the first time since Vanessa had driven through my gate, my confidence slipped. According to the county mapping system, the eastern edge of Silver Pines curved uphill farther than I expected. A shaded boundary appeared to touch the area around my cabin. Is that the legal property line? I asked. Susan leaned toward the screen. This is the Geographic Information System map. It is useful for reference, but it is not a boundary survey. Useful for reference was not the answer I wanted. She opened another record. Silver Pines had filed a subdivision plat during its expansion several years earlier, and the digital overlay appeared to follow that newer filing. I could suddenly understand why Vanessa sounded so certain. On a computer screen, she looked right. I spent the next hour comparing dates, parcel descriptions, and scanned documents until the numbers started swimming together. Walter's deed was older. The subdivision plat was newer. Neither document magically explained why the lines did not match. 2 nights later, I attended a Silver Pines board meeting in a clubhouse that smelled like lemon cleaner and expensive coffee. Vanessa sat beneath a stone fireplace with 6 board members arranged beside her. She had already placed an enlarged version of the digital map on an easel. My cabin was marked with a red circle. Mr. Cole has repeatedly refused association compliance, she announced. 20 residents turned toward me. I kept my hands flat on the table. Show me the recorded document that puts parcel 18 to 447 inside your association. Vanessa tapped the map. The county recognizes our development boundary. That is not what I asked. Her smile hardened. The matter has already been reviewed. Then she announced that the board had authorized the next stage of enforcement against the cabin. Pins scratched across paper. Someone whispered behind me. I could hear the heating system humming through the floor. I should have felt defeated. Instead, I kept staring at the enlarged map. Something was wrong with the label beneath my red circle. The subdivision map referenced parcel 18 to 474. My deed said 18 to 447. Same digits. Different order. I asked Vanessa for a copy. She looked almost pleased when she handed it over. Back at the cabin, I spread Walter's deed, his handwritten map, and the Silver Pines plat across the kitchen table. Rain clicked against the windows. I checked the numbers again. 18 to 447. 18 to 474. Then I unfolded Walter's old map completely for the first time. A faded red line continued far beyond the cabin, down the ridge, and straight toward the valley below. I followed it with my finger until it disappeared beneath the words Walter had written decades earlier. South boundary confirmed by survey. I reached for my phone and called Daniel Mercer. Daniel Mercer arrived the next morning in a mud-splattered pickup with 2 equipment cases and the expression of a man who had already found something interesting. He was 56, gray at the temples, patient with old records, and almost impossible to impress. I trusted him because he never guessed when. He could measure. The air smelled of wet pine after the overnight rain as we spread Walter's deed and the subdivision plat across my workbench. Daniel adjusted his glasses and tapped the 2 parcel numbers. This could be a clerical problem, he said, or somebody built a map from the wrong starting point. Neither possibility made me comfortable. We started beside the cabin. Daniel set up his survey equipment while I cleared pine needles from the rusty steel pin Walter had shown me decades earlier. The metal was cold beneath my fingertips. Daniel took the first reading, checked his screen, then looked toward the ridge. That monument matches the old description. We followed the bearing through nearly 400 yards of timber. The ground dropped sharply in places, wet leaves sliding beneath my boots. Daniel found the second marker beside a granite outcrop, exactly where Walter's map predicted. The third took almost an hour. We crossed a narrow drainage channel and came out near the landscaped edge of silver pines. I could smell fresh mulch before I saw the houses. Daniel stopped beside a row of decorative shrubs. His receiver chirped. Should be within 6 feet. We searched until I noticed a patch of rust beneath a layer of bark mulch. I brushed it clean. Another survey pin. 10 feet away stood the polished stone monument that read Silver Pines Estates. Daniel measured again. Then again. His expression changed. Ethan, your cabin is not inside their boundary. Relief hit first, warm and immediate. Then I noticed he was still staring downhill. What? He pulled up the historical description and walked another 30 feet toward the entrance landscaping. More measurements. More silence. Finally, he pointed past the monument toward the private access road and the strip of common ground beside it. Your grandfather's southern line does not stop at the ridge. It continues down here. I looked at the homes beyond the trees. How far? I am not giving you an answer until I complete the survey. That was Daniel. No drama. No guesses. But his voice had changed. Over the next 2 days, he located additional monuments and compared them with recorded plats. Each point supported the same uncomfortable possibility. Silver Pines had expanded across a boundary that Walter's deed described decades earlier. On the 3rd afternoon, Daniel stood beside my kitchen table with a preliminary drawing. A red line crossed the entrance monument, part of the access road, and a section labeled Common Area. This needs formal verification, he said. But Vanessa has been asking the wrong question. I stared at that red line. She wanted to know whether my cabin belonged to her homeowners association. The real question was how much of her homeowners association was sitting on land tied to my deed. I did not call Vanessa. That surprised Daniel more than anything. He stood beside my kitchen table with the preliminary survey spread between us, waiting for me to react. Outside, rainwater dripped from the eaves in a slow, steady rhythm. You understand what this could mean, he said. I do. I folded the drawing and slid it back toward him. Finish it. 2 days later, Vanessa emailed me another notice demanding written confirmation that I would cooperate with removal of the cabin. I stared at the message while drinking coffee beside Walter's old fireplace. 6 weeks earlier, I would have answered immediately. This time, I typed one sentence. Please provide the specific recorded authority and property description you are relying upon. Her response arrived before my coffee cooled. Attached were the same subdivision map, the same association language, and a letter carrying her signature. She stated that Silver Pines possessed jurisdiction over the cabin and the access road. I printed everything. The warm pages smelled faintly of toner as they slid from the printer. Then I placed them in my growing folder. Vanessa thought she was building a case against me. I was letting her document mine. I hired a property attorney named Rachel Bennett to review Walter's deed, Daniel's measurements, and every notice Vanessa had sent. Rachel was careful with her words. She told me a survey did not automatically settle every legal question, and nobody should start making dramatic ownership claims before the title records were fully examined. That was fine with me. I did not need drama. I needed facts. Daniel completed his fieldwork while Rachel ordered historical records. I photographed every existing marker, the iron gate, the entrance monument, and the places where Silver Pine signs had appeared on the gravel road. I saved emails as full files instead of screenshots. Dates mattered. Signatures mattered. Exact language mattered. Then Vanessa made the mistake I had been waiting for. She scheduled the contractor. Her notice gave me the date and stated that the board had formally authorized removal if I did not comply. I replied asking whether that decision represented the official position of Silver Pines. Vanessa answered with 3 words. Yes, it does. I printed that page too. The next evening, I drove past the entrance monument at sunset. Sprinklers hissed across the common lawn. Water glittered under the stone sign while families walked dogs along the sidewalk, completely unaware that their association president had created a property dispute none of them had asked for. I did not blame them. Most of those homeowners probably had no idea my cabin existed. This was Vanessa's decision, not theirs. Back at the cabin, I placed Walter's brass key beside the finished survey packet. Daniel had marked the verified monuments and the disputed overlap clearly. Rachel had already contacted the appropriate county office about the conflicting records. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait. 3 mornings later, diesel engines climbed my gravel road. By 7:13 that morning, the excavator was idling 20 feet from Walter's porch, exactly where this story began. Diesel exhaust drifted through the pines while Vanessa stood beside her Range Rover, holding the removal order like a victory certificate. After Daniel told me not to let anyone move anything, I slipped my phone into my jacket. Someone who knows where your property line actually is, I told her. Vanessa gave a small laugh. We have already established the property line. Then waiting a few minutes should not bother you. The contractor shut down the excavator. The sudden silence was almost startling. Vanessa immediately objected, but the foreman shook his head. I am not touching a structure with an active boundary dispute. 23 minutes later, tires crunched through the iron gate. Daniel arrived first. Rachel Bennett followed in her sedan, carrying a document case. Daniel opened his equipment case and walked directly to the rusty pin beside the porch. Vanessa watched him work. Her confidence lasted until he placed the first marker flag, then the second, then another farther downhill. The cabin is outside the recorded Silver Pines Association boundary, Rachel said carefully. Vanessa opened her folder. That contradicts county records. It contradicts the geographic information system overlay you have been using, Rachel replied. That overlay is not a boundary survey. I watched Vanessa's fingers tighten around the glossy map she had shown me weeks earlier. Daniel unfolded the completed survey across the hood of my truck. The red boundary line ran well south of the cabin. Vanessa leaned closer. Her eyes followed it downhill. That cannot be right. Daniel tapped the survey notes. The field monuments correspond with the older recorded legal description. The conflicting subdivision records now require formal review. Rachel turned another page. The county has been notified. Until the title and boundary issues are resolved, nobody should represent this overlap as settled property. Vanessa barely seemed to hear her. She was staring at the red line. It crossed the landscaped entrance area. It continued through part of the access road. Then it cut across a section identified on Silver Pines documents as common land. The color drained from her face. You are saying Silver Pines is on his property? Rachel chose her words with precision. I am saying the current survey and historical deed records indicate a significant overlap with Ethan's parcel, and your association has been asserting control on the opposite assumption. The excavator engine ticked softly as it cooled. Somewhere downhill, a sprinkler clicked across a lawn. Vanessa looked toward the entrance monument visible between the trees, then back at the paper. For weeks she had demanded that I prove why my cabin did not belong under her authority. Now she was standing beside the survey pin Walter had protected for decades, facing a much harder question. I picked up her signed removal notice from the hood of my truck and placed it beside Daniel's survey. You wanted to know what gives me the right to keep my cabin here, I said. Now we need to find out what gives your homeowners association the right to be down there. The excavator left before 9 that morning without touching a single board. I stood beside the porch and watched its yellow frame disappear through the pines, diesel fading until all I could hear was wind moving through the branches. Vanessa left without another argument. For the first time since she had entered my property, she had nothing useful to say. The weeks that followed were quieter, but the paperwork was not. Rachel worked through the title records while Daniel submitted his survey for review. The county corrected the mapping issue around my cabin and began addressing the conflicting subdivision records. Silver Pines hired its own attorney and surveyor. Their conclusions did not make Vanessa's position any easier. The association withdrew every violation against me, canceled the removal action, and confirmed in writing that Parcel 18 to 447 was not subject to Silver Pines covenants. The fines disappeared. The security restrictions disappeared. So did the green signs they had mounted along Walter's gravel road. The larger boundary problem took longer. Nobody lost a home. I never wanted that. The homeowners in Silver Pines had bought their properties in good faith, and most of them knew nothing about Vanessa's campaign against me. The disputed entrance area, access road, and common ground were handled through attorneys, corrected records, and a negotiated property agreement. Silver Pines had to recognize my ownership interests and secure the appropriate legal rights for the portions it needed to continue using. That agreement also covered my legal and surveying expenses. Vanessa's signed letters became difficult for the board to ignore. At a special meeting, residents learned how many warnings she had issued without verifying the underlying boundary. By winter, she was no longer association president. I heard that news from a neighbor, not from Vanessa. That seemed appropriate. I never needed an apology. In early December, I finished the cabin roof. Snow had started collecting along the ridge, and the air smelled like pine smoke and frozen earth. One afternoon, I walked down the gravel road to Walter's old iron gate. The Silver Pine sign was gone. Only 4 small bolt holes remained where someone had attached it. I reached into my coat and pulled out the brass key I had found in Walter's kitchen cabinet months earlier. The metal felt cold against my palm. I slid it into the lock and turned it. Click. Such a small sound for something that had caused so much trouble. Before closing the gate, I looked downhill toward the stone entrance monument and the rows of roofs beyond it. Vanessa had believed authority came from a folder, a title, and enough confidence to make other people stop asking questions. Walter understood something simpler. He had shown it to me when I was 12 years old, standing beside a rusty steel marker I barely noticed. Lines matter. Not because they give you permission to bully the person on the other side, but because respecting them is how neighbors remain neighbors. I locked the gate, put the brass key back in my pocket, and walked toward the cabin. Justice had never needed to shout. It had been sitting quietly in the ground the entire time.